Today's the day. On this day, 5 years ago, I decided to start making videos on YouTube. A decision that, all things considered, has thus far done nothing but make my life better. To celebrate that, I want to drag you, dear viewer, kicking and screaming into the past. This video, as the title heavily implies, is the first video ever uploaded to this channel, except I made it a second time. So now, let's forget that I ever said anything, and pretend like this isn't the intro to this video, and instead, all agree that the video starts now. A big part of growing up is learning how to interface with the world around you. Sure, you could always just put every new concept into your mouth like a toddler, but eventually that may cease to serve its purpose. Because of this development, we all end up in that awkward stage where, while we may not be putting things in our mouths to figure them out, we aren't exactly doing much better. Perhaps it's because a child's imagination is one of the strongest forces known to man, that when not given the proper outlet to use it, it can become a deadly weapon. I've certainly discussed how that weapon can turn on itself, but what about the damage it can cause others? I noticed that when I was a child, me and the children around me sure did love lying to each other. It never even made much sense what we'd lie about. That's the weapon in action. I could just say we were all a bunch of jerks, but I'm more inclined to see it as uncontrolled imagination. Sure, some instances were definitely to seem cool, but some of the shit I used to spew certainly doesn't come across as making me cooler in hindsight. The weirdest part about all this is the degree to which we all just decided to believe each other. Maybe we knew. Maybe we didn't. The end result is that I had a ton of bizarre ideas as to how the world worked. I could sit here and talk about all the strangeties to ever exist, but I prefer honing in on one topic especially. Pokémon. I'm sure that we've all at least heard of the Mew under the truck rumor. The legend stating that if you brought a Pokémon with the move Strength to the unexplained truck, inaccessible for an incredibly short window of time, without glitches, next to the SSN, that you'd be able to move the truck and obtain the 151st Pokémon, Mew. It's obviously not true in hindsight, but it was the perfect set of conditions to create the perfect rumor. After all, what else could the truck be used for? I've already answered this one. While I was never informed of any pink vehicle-dwelling cats as a kid, I certainly did have my own bizarre beliefs. That's why today, I want to beam this information directly into your forehead as I talk about the stupid things I believed about Pokémon as a child. Let's start from the very beginning. My first ever interactions with Pokémon. The first actual interaction was with a toy Pokeball, but as for meaningful exposure, it was being given the first Pokémon movie on VHS. One day, as I was laying down for bed, my mother presented me with the tape, saying it was a gift from my at-the-time stepbrother. I absorbed that movie into my skin, and it birthed the Pokémon fan within me. The first possible misconception was me mishearing the Pokédex in the short before the movie, Pikachu's Vacation. It mentions Raichu as being the evolved form of Pikachu.
Raichu, the evolved form of Pikachu.
A fairly normal statement that my poor stupid ears heard as peak evolved form, which is not a thing that exists. Fast forward an unknowable period of time, and I had my hands on a copy of the Beckett Pokemon fan magazine. It was one of the highlights of going to the grocery store until they were forced to cease production due to using official images. Okay, editing quick here. I wanted to clarify something because I feel like leaving it at that isn't actually correct. Because when I looked into it to get visual reference, oh my fucking god. You see why I can't record every time I want to? Why videos take so long? Anyways. Yeah, the actual case against Beckett was more like they had a card selling website where like you could sell your cards and like, you know, people can buy your cards, and the whole transaction is something where the owners, Beckett, get like, you know, a cut of the profit. And so by advertising that in their magazine and selling the magazine using official images, they're technically like doing something wrong, I guess. Or at least that's what is being used to prevent them from continuing to do what they are doing. Just thought that was like more important than the initial claim. Pokemon Company would have you by the neck for citing official sources in your Pokemon essay, I swear to God. The utter corruption of intellectual copyright laws aside, I recall a page of one of the Gen 4 era magazines containing the Gibble line and the Munchlax. I recall a page of one of the Gen 4 era magazines containing the Gibble line and Munchlax together. I could hardly read at the time, so my brain naturally put the pieces together as Munchlax somehow fitting into this family. I couldn't exactly place where Munchlax would go in the evolution line, but I was fairly certain this had to be the case. In reality, what I was looking at was simply the most terrifyingly powerful baby Pokemon ever invented. Due to my limited reading abilities and terrible time hearing words correctly, I also had a few assumptions about Pokemon names. Some of them were merely misreading the name, such as Sceptile becoming Steptile, which I'm pretty sure we call a pressure plate nowadays, but some were just plain random. Sandshrew became Sammy, which, hey, at least I got the first two letters correct. Leafeon became Leafin, which is a mispronunciation ripe with puns, but I think I'll have to decline to make any for now. It is now time for Tubemouth. You see it, right? I always saw Nosepas's Gen 3 sprite as being a head with a pencil neck and a tube for a mouth. It's supposed to be a head, yes, but those are its legs. What I thought were its ears are its arms, which I'm pretty sure is at least somewhat intentional. Nosepass was also just generally an enigmatic Pokemon to me. You only ever see it once or twice in a playthrough, as its encounter condition was so esoteric that I only ever figured it out as an adult. You have to use Rock Smash on these very specific rocks in this very specific room in Granite Cave, and if you do, you have a small chance for Nosepass to appear. Forget the damn Reggies, at least those guys had hints. Nosepass is the real mystery of Gen 3. The Tubemouth journey doesn't end here, though. Let's talk about Archie. No, not the hot one, the one that looks like a cheap Halloween costume. Yeah, that's better. During my many journeys through Hoenn, I couldn't help but notice that Archie, every time he appears on screen in the overworld, looks a little strange. The heavily stylized A for Aqua becomes a comically standard A, but the most important detail is what I can only assume is supposed to be a portion of his chest that's exposed? Instead of seeing it as such, I ended up always seeing Archie as having a pout. Not just a pout though, a tube mouth pout. If you crop the sprite correctly, he even just kind of turns into the Blender Monkey. I also can't help but notice how incredibly odd Archie looks in his official art. He looks like a distant character that you'd never be able to get close enough to notice the details of. I don't think Awakening Kyogre is going to fix him if that's what he was expecting. This entry is dedicated to all of those locations in Pokemon that you wanted to go to but couldn't. And by you, I mean me. Let's start off with one that is so incredibly specific to me, the Cave of Origin. In Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, the Cave of Origin is a location where you fight Kyogre and or Groudon depending on the version. In Emerald version, the game I played as a kid, it's the location where you consult Wallace over the aforementioned super ancient Pokemon waging war outside. Once said Pokemon have been successfully scolded for their behavior by their Skyfather, you may desire to return to the Cave of Origin, as I did. Unfortunately, the second that you finish your business in there, you can never enter again. The man standing in front of the cave won't budge and thus it remains inaccessible. This isn't an issue in normal gameplay, as the Pokemon that appear inside of the cave are also found elsewhere, but if you're playing a randomizer, you could very easily end up locked out of Pokemon exclusive to the cave. I know this because it has happened to me. In fact, the layout of the cave is entirely different in Emerald, having half the number of rooms as Ruby and Sapphire. But that doesn't mean that the rooms don't exist. They certainly still do. You just can't access them through normal gameplay. This means that the above issue experience during a randomizer is tenfold the problem it originally seemed. Now what exactly does one do when they can't re-enter the Cave of Origin? Why, make shit up, of course. I recall fairly vividly my time spent with an old friend. I'll call him O, as he does come up fairly frequently in this video. I haven't seen O in nearly 2 decades now, but he was the source of a lot of misconceptions I had about Pokemon. He once told me that you could attempt to break back into the Cave of Origin using the Acrobike, but doing so would cause the man blocking the way to challenge you to a battle. The battle was nigh unwinnable, as the man had an extremely powerful Mew that could make your Pokemon de-evolve. While the obvious solution is to just bring a Sableye, the concept of this unwinnable battle never left me. I remember trying this break-in trick a few times, but I could never pull it off. Perhaps it was for the best. I don't think I want my Pokemon to de-evolve anyways. From one Zootopolis City old man to the next, let's talk about the one that I'm sure most people remember, the barricaded door. In the bottom right-hand corner of Zootopolis City sits a house with an old man inside. He speaks of his youth and how he now only finds enjoyment in watching battles, rather than participating. This former trainer isn't the thing that'll likely catch one's eye, though. It's the doorway. The stairs blocked by 3 potted plants. Anyone unfortunate enough to enter this house will leave without answers as to what they are seeing, or at least, they would back in the day. With the power of modern technology, scientists were able to reverse engineer the nature of obstructing potted plants and find the secret. The Game Boy Advance e-reader. The e-reader was a peripheral designed to allow for additional content in select Game Boy Advance games. The most notable for this video, pertaining to the Pokémon franchise. As its name suggests, it was designed to read data, specifically from special cards. While plenty of cards were released in Japan, other regions didn't quite see the same result. You might then think that the answer is as simple as we never got the cards required to enter those stairs, and you'd be right. Well, perhaps even too right. The usage of "we" actually extends farther than you'd expect. Not even Japan ended up getting the cards for this area, leaving it completely unused in all versions of the game. With that, what exactly was the purpose of the stairs and where do they lead? By removing the plants blocking the way with a map editor, and assuring that the elevation data is correct so that the player can actually touch the warp, you'll be able to enter the fabled room long kept from the eyes of the wandering horde it had left its mark upon. Climbing the stairs, the player will be met with a hiker, one just as unfathomably confused as we are. Has this man really been here for all these years, locked away in a barren room, only the very plants that hold him captive for company? What will he bless us with for freeing him? A legendary Pokemon? A rare item? Classic knob-translated dialogue? How about a game reset? Well, that's what happened to me at least. I'm pretty sure the game wouldn't react nearly as politely on a more accurate emulator or on actual hardware for that matter. After testing this with my own 2 hands, I was able to find out thanks to YouTube user RFX that the Japanese version actually has data for a trainer battle still in it. One that, while uneventful, does show a more completed version of the encounter with the hiker. The data required for the event to transpire appears to have been scrubbed from the US version, resulting in the game reacting violently to trying to access it. As I was writing this script, it hit me like a truck that Fire Red and Leaf Green also had a similar door on Seven Island. I decided to look at Bulbapedia for Seven Island in the hopes of seeing if it had anything to say about the door. Sure enough, it did, and it even references the one in Moss Deep City. Wait, Moss Deep? It's not in Moss Deep City, it's in Zootopolis. It was then that I found the secret of the universe. I decided to rush my way through Pokemon Ruby, and sure enough, it was there. The building I was used to being the multiplayer minigames I never once played was now the home of the door. This time with a closed door rather than plants blocking it. Naturally, I had to make some edits to the ROM and try to enter the door. Upon doing so, I was met with a new character. Not a hiker this time, but instead, I don't know, this guy? Rather than being so polite as to reset my game, he instead decided to start producing the iconic garbage noise that haunted my entire childhood. My next question was how it played out in Fire Red and Leaf Green, so naturally I played through the near entirety of Fire Red in one sitting, finishing with the most team ever. My Raticate took a Psychic from the rival's Alakazam at non-full health and lived, retaliating and defeating the Alakazam. It was great. Now, unlike my Ruby playthrough, I actually had to play a grand majority of Fire Red to reach the house. Unlike the other games, this one saves the house for the actual farthest point from the start of the game it could possibly be. All the way on the post-game location Seven Island. Upon reaching the island and entering the house, I was greeted with yet another brand new way to block the doorway. We've seen locked doors, we've seen plant triplets. Now get ready for a lot of boxes.
I get a lot of boxes.
Doing the same surgery on the game as I've been doing this entire time, I was greeted with a small boy. He is confused. Very confused. Nothing out of the ordinary there. But suddenly he reveals his secret. It wasn't a small boy. It was cheap Halloween costume Archie the entire time. Shocked at this sudden turn, I was unable to protect myself from his ultimate attack. I couldn't react fast enough. Before I knew it, I was met with ?2. So yeah, a small boy who is actually Archie, leader of Team Aqua, has been sealed away in this old woman's attic for the past 2 decades. I'm not sure why this fight functions to the degree that it does, but winning it, which is by no means a difficult task, results in the sequence successfully completing itself, making this the only way to see how the e-reader sequence was intended to play out, without having to, play through all of Emerald in Japanese. Which, for the record, I nearly did, mind you. I got past the 3rd gym before realizing I needed to stop doing this to myself. Weirdly enough, I never actually knew what exactly would be behind the door as a kid. I never had anyone try to tell me anything was back there, nor did my imagination run wild. I just saw it as weird, thought about it sometimes, and then stopped thinking about it just as fast. I'm glad to have closure, even if it resulted in me having to break into multiple elderly people's homes with magical powers beyond human comprehension. The Pokemon Mansion of Pokemon Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum contains a strange little statue that I'm sure caused many a curious child to think too hard. I would know, as I was one of those curious children. I actually had the strategy guide for Diamond and Pearl, thus making it possible to know what was required of me. The statue was guarded for all but the latest hours of the night, leaving me no choice but to stay up to, at the time, freakish hours of the night in order to satisfy my thinking sponge. Was it worth it? No. Going up to the statue while it's unguarded results in some funny text and nothing more. No secrets to uncover of any flavor. Which, in all honesty, is good. Gating something actually cool in a game marketed at children behind staying up until 3 AM is kind of a bad idea, I'd argue. I'd even say that I knew the significance of the statue had to be low, given that trying to explain why I needed to stay up until infinity at night resulted in the creation of something so allegedly amusing that it would be brought up for basically my entire life whenever the chance arose. For you see, dear viewer, I could not articulate that I needed to stay up so that I could interact with a statue while it wasn't being guarded. No. I had to stay up because there were guys that only came out at night. That's right, guys that only came out at night. So for years to follow, I would occasionally be asked about the guys that only came out at night. I had very little to say about them. For some reason, my mind always envisioned a Crobat being one of the guys. Unfortunately, Crobat cannot be found in the wild, thus making its role as a guy who only comes out at night very unlikely to be filled. Pokemon exist. It's true. Look out any window and you're likely to see Pikachu's face plastered onto the side of the nearest object. But how do we truly know when a Pokemon exists? As a child, I just kind of made it up as I went along. For example, have you ever heard of a baby Squirtle? It's like a normal Squirtle, except it has a tail. What's that, you say? Squirtle has a tail? Well, that's not its full tail. Squirtle's tail gets smaller as it grows up, or something. I can't even find the card I remember informing this non-existent fact, but I'm pretty sure it had to be related to the way that tadpoles lose their tails as they become frogs. That very likely informed my concept as to how baby Squirtle would function. The card featured a Squirtle with a relatively large tail swimming underwater. Looking into it, I can't even seem to find this card. The closest thing I could find is the Team Rocket expansion Squirtle, though even that is far from what I remember. Perhaps the card I saw was fake. Who knows? Alright, geniuses. So if you've never heard of Baby Squirtle, what about the Flying Forretress? As a child, I loved the Pokemon Ranger games. As a not child, I still seem to at least enjoy the Pokemon Ranger games. While Shadows of Almia took me eons to beat, as the Rampardos boss kept me at bay until I realized how fucked up the Steel-type assist was, and the Stealth section kept me at bay until I had my mother do it for me, Guardian Sign seemingly never had this issue. It is by far my favorite of the series, and with relatively good reason. Have you ever wanted to ride on the back of a legendary beast? What about soar on the back of whatever the Eon Duo are supposed to be? Not only can you do both of these things, but you actually kind of need to do so quite often. It's all done through the titular Guardian Signs, known as Ranger Signs. They're symbols that you draw with a touchscreen to summon Pokemon that can help you. While a lot of the signs are obtained through normal human means, there exist several that are secret. For example, a sign is drawn during the game's intro, and if you try to enter it in-game, you get Mewtwo. I only actually learned this one through the internet, but it's still cool that it technically exists out in the open like that. I remember looking at a list of Ranger signs online at one point, seeing one listed as Flying Fortress. I don't remember if I had just never gotten to that point at the time or if I had merely forgotten, but I completely misread Flying Fortress as Flying Forretress, leading to the belief that there was a Forretress that could fly. Little did I know, Forretress could technically fly already, swiftly and brutally drowning this entire idea in distilled redundancy with the hindsight of being where I am now. Still, I tried to summon the Forretress. It didn't do anything. The Ranger sign I found was likely the one used during the Sky Fortress section of the game, used to open a door, and as such, would not be of any use to someone looking to obtain a special Pokemon before or after the fact. How a Flying Fortress would differ from a regular one is up for debate, as regular ones can already move through the air. But I'm sure if Skarmory's Rain is anything to go by, the answer is that another defensive steel type that can fly would probably signal the end times. So, you know about Floaroma Town's secret, right? The special Pokemon that shows up there? I'm starting to think either my audience is stupid or I've been taught pure lies. In the deepest, darkest depths of my memory, there exists a person who I don't even know if I ever had them named for me. I don't even know if they're their own person. But I ended up meeting this guy through my mother's friends having children. The classic way to learn misinformation about Pokemon. He, unlike O, had Pokemon Diamond and or Pearl, like me. I remember playing in Sinnoh's Underground with him quite a bit. I already loved that place, but knowing I could also be there with more than myself was mind-blowing. He, as many people did, led to me learning something about Pokemon that is entirely debatable in its truth. I was told that if you went to Floaroma Town at night, you could find a special Pokemon. What Pokemon? Who knows? I never did find out. For some reason, I always imagined it was Darkrai, but now I've started believing it was probably referring to Drifloon. While Drifloon isn't obtained in the town, it is just down the road from the town, and its appearance condition isn't exactly something I imagine most children had an easy time grasping. It could be that he found Drifloon late at night and just assumed it was the product of the time. Sure, it is a product of the time, only appearing on Fridays, but the time of day itself doesn't impact anything. While it was likely Drifloon, it's also entirely possible that he saw something else. Something nobody else has. Something waiting to be discovered. Have you checked Floaroma Town lately? While fake Pokemon are fun and all, don't those guys need, like, a location to appear in? What happens when the Pokemon exists but the location doesn't? That's an easy one. It results in Salamence Island. Presumably just off the coast of Mauville City, in the Hoenn region, sits an island that I'm sure none of you in the audience have ever stepped foot on. That's because it doesn't exist. Or, at least not in the traditional sense. You can stare at the map all you wish, but you can never go there. The island even exists in the remake of Ruby and Sapphire. You're able to visit a cave on it, to fight Zekrom or Reshiram, depending on the version you're playing. But that's as far as it'll ever let you go. Well, my buddy O told me that it was an island where you could catch wild Salamence, hence why I refer to it as Salamence Island. If you really squint your eyes, you might be able to convince yourself that Zekrom is Salamence, but I can't seem to find a way to pull that off myself. I feel like I remember other Pokemon like Dusclops being considered as encounters on the island, but that might have just been my brain filling in blanks. As I was an Emerald player, Dusclops wasn't encountered in the wild outside of the battle facilities, making the idea that it would be very enticing. Route 224 was always an enigma to me. It's one of the only dead ends in the region of Sinnoh without some sort of special reason, or so I believed as a child. Rummaging around in the grass of the area would yield fairly uninteresting encounters. The water never fared much better. You like Tentacruel? We have Tentacruel. If one ventured deep enough into Route 224, they'd stumble across this distinct and unusual rock. If you were like me, this rock was the bane of your existence. This rock haunted me, leaving me with nothing but unending curiosity and a sense of annoyance. What did it do? Why was it here? Who decided it would go here? Why? If you watched the video that this one is an updated version of, you'd be led to believe that this was the site of many a rumor, that I was tricked into thinking that there was more to this dead end than initially thought. And for that, I must apologize. Nobody ever told me these things. It took me a while, but I finally remembered that it was I who made those things up. It was my weapon against a fairly annoying kid. Like a Doom status effect in an RPG, I planted this information on him and walked away, knowing the battle was already over. I remember telling him that if you interacted with the rock and then ran towards a specific part of the cliff, that you could use rock climb to enter a secret cave. While I put a lot of emphasis on Golem being there, I can also recall mentioning to him that the Royal Nidos were in there too. More specifically Nidoqueen. As it turns out, sometimes your greatest weapon in combat is making up a cave for golems. As for the true purpose of Route 224, it's just a boring mythical Pokemon in the most uncanny-ass location in any Pokemon games I've ever played. I wouldn't worry about it. The internet was always a strange place to me. At first, I only got the tiniest glimpses into what it could be like. I knew it was full of things, many things, things I had never seen before. At the time, the internet was a boundless source of new concepts, but it wasn't easy to access. I only had the computers at school and the heavily restricted dial-up computer at home. I had always used that computer to play various disc-based games, but I never once stepped foot on the internet. Not until the day I got stuck trying to defeat Baby Bowser, the penultimate fight of Yoshi's Island. I finally got tired of not knowing what to do, and I asked if I could look it up. Turns out you just need to pound the ground like the boss was doing the entire fight. Huh. My first uses for the internet were simple. I recall wanting to look up a map of Diamond and Pearl's underground. I can also recall wishing to play some Flash games I had already indulged in at school. The real fun didn't start until the day I was given my mother's laptop to use. I don't recall the circumstances that led me there, but I ended up looking into Pokemon videos. Some were deeply inappropriate for a child to be seeing, but thankfully they were mostly just crass hack showcases. Sure, the concepts were terrible, but they were merely dialogue coming out of a Pokemon NPC. Things could have been much worse. I remember quite a few distinct videos I would find myself watching. One was a video of Pokemon Fire Red gameplay, where a player evolves their Charmander into cheese. Like a block of cheese. It was just a Charmeleon, sure, but it was also cheese. There was also a video that I kept coming back to for some reason, where it showcased a hack in which the player can encounter Gurr from Invader Zim, who I recall having Moltres' cry. That one was really hard to find sometimes because YouTube would always think I misspelled girl and wanted to see, like, the big bazongas. Not all videos were so kind, however. Some may have enriched my life, but others? Oh dear. Others were not to be trusted. They formed fears within me, fears of somehow encountering the things in the videos I saw. They made me fearful of entering the location shown or performing the steps taken. The first one, which I'm sure affected a lot of people, was My Pikachu Evolved, What a Bad Trainer Gets. The video is, in hindsight, extremely low quality. It has that Mario Flash game vibe where you're playing as Paper Mario on Mario 3 tiles with a new Super Mario Bros. Background against Super Mario World enemies while Yoshi's Island music plays. It starts with the famous, comically oversized and blurry Gen 4 Pikachu. Shortly after, the sickest fucking MIDI of the evolution jingle you've ever heard plays, followed by the actual most sound effect ever. The result? Whatever this thing is. Not even the video itself quite knows what's going on, and neither did I as a kid. This video, combined with others involving bee-canceling evolutions, made me wary of evolution. It gave me a sense that evolution was a fragile process, and just about anything I do near it would cause malfunction. Thankfully, I never did get what a bad trainer does, but that didn't stop me from fearing this video. It made me believe that if I didn't treat Pikachu right, and let its friendship stat slip, I'd be headed right for what this video offered. What a bad trainer gets. Michael fucking Jackson. This one was strange, yet in a lot of ways understandable. The Why the Michael Jackson Appeared saga consisted of 2 videos wherein the famous musician Michael Jackson fucking obliterates the player's entire team one by one. Both videos, while low quality, were without a doubt the highest quality of their kind back when they were created. The first video, posted in 2008, shows us that Manectric is the only Pokemon capable of defeating Jackson, though perhaps not at level 30. Every Pokemon sent out after Manectric is incapable of dealing damage. After successfully managing to annihilate the player's party, the most infamous thing of all takes place. For you see, the humor is derived from the fact that Michael Jackson was alleged to have molested children. Is that not simply the most humorous observation? A year after this video in 2009, much to the despair of many, Michael Jackson would pass away. Naturally, this warranted a sequel to the video a year following his death, wherein the deceased singer rises from the grave. Somehow he went from level 80 to level 50, which implies that the King of Pop present here may not be the same one as before. Despite this level decrease, and the increase in level that the player's party received in many places, the fight is even less possible. Not a single scratch of damage is dealt against the undead dancer. In fact, MJ wins so hard that he manages to deflect a Master Ball, catching the player. For you see, the humor is derived from the fact that Michael Jackson somehow these videos managed to make me scared of Mount Pyre. Not the top of Pokemon Tower as depicted in the video, but Mount Pyre, or, Neverland Ranch. Never knew how similar that place was to the Pokemon Tower. At the time, I hadn't touched Pokemon Fire Red or Leaf Green, and so I suppose my brain managed to override some of the details to frame things in a way that my existing Pokemon knowledge could actually use. You'd think that Mount Pyre being a graveyard would be the reason to fear it, but no, it was the prospect of a deceased musician engaging me in combat that made me avoid the place. While the channel that uploaded the videos hasn't uploaded in 12 years, a pinned comment from 3 years ago shows that they're still out there. Maybe one day we'll be gifted with a 3rd video. I don't know if I'd be able to handle it, honestly. How the hell do I even begin to talk about this one? Of the many videos I saw through my mother's laptop, one truly sticks out for just how absurd it is. One that, even to this day, remains an absolute enigma to me. Why it exists and why it scared me to the degree that it did will never be understood, but nevertheless, here I am to discuss it. A video I recall being titled Pokemon Poopie. In the video, footage of someone walking around in the first room of Hoenn's Victory Road is shown. They eventually encounter a wild Pokemon, which is none other than a large, poorly constructed and sprited log of feces. The music that accompanied the video was incredibly ominous at the time and did not even remotely fit the tone of the video. For whatever reason, following this video being viewed, it continued to haunt my dreams on several occasions, such as a dream where I was in the battle factory and found that suddenly one of my rental Pokemon was the fabled log, and I had no choice but to send it into battle. Never will I understand what was so frightening about that video or its main attraction, but in hindsight perhaps the concept of a log that big is fairly frightening if you're like a plumbing system or something. Naturally I had to find the video I was thinking of, but unfortunately that was no easy task. It doesn't seem to exist anymore, but I was easily able to find a video that was of use. In early 2007, YouTube user dat.cap would upload a series of videos playing a hack seemingly known as Ruby Dragonstone. In the third episode, aptly named Poopie, the player eventually ends up in Victory Road, where, much to my surprise, we actually catch a glimpse of the exact shitlog I was talking about. It isn't until part 4 where we get to learn about this creature. Its dex entry is completely unchanged, showing us that it replaced Weedle. We even get to see what a shiny one looks like. Going further, we learn that this Pokemon is Fire Poison, with the ability Wonder Guard, and seemingly 255 in every stat, given that it has these stats at level 41. This is as far as we go with the episodes of this series, leaving it unknown what it's like to actually use this completely normal and healthy creature in a battle. Trying to find Ruby Dragonstone doesn't really seem possible, especially with a later hack taking the Dragonstone name. If anyone knows how to get this hack, I'd love to know. It seems to be quite ancient, and is probably dipping closer and closer to being fully lost with each passing day. My buddy O didn't just introduce me to misinformation. Sometimes he'd actually tell me something that was correct. He was the one to thank when it came to me learning about MissingNo. Of course, I couldn't spell back then, so Google had to work overtime to figure out what the fuck I was typing in. Ever heard of that there Mishango glitch? The MissingNo rabbit hole was one that instilled a fear of video game glitches into me at a young age. Now, as an adult who develops video games, I recognize just how right I was at the time. It wasn't just MissingNo either, it was also Bad Egg. Bad Egg was an absolutely terrifying concept, and still kind of is. It's a stain on your save file, a disgusting mold that develops if the game thinks you've done something wrong. It's the parent not being mad, just disappointed. If the game rules that you have done the incorrect thing, its judgment will leave you with a bad egg. What is Bad Egg? Imagine a Pokemon egg that never hatches. Once you have a bad egg, getting rid of it isn't easy. It seems that whoever designed this thing really wanted players to be burdened by its presence, and as such it can only be dealt with through cheats or glitches. Bad eggs come from when a Pokemon's checksum fails. That is to say, a Pokemon's data doesn't add up to the game. Any Pokemon deemed to be invalid as a result of a checksum failure will turn into a bad egg. Bad eggs don't do anything especially bad, contrary to their name, but that doesn't mean people knew and understood this every step of the way. I was once blessed with a video known as Dangers of the Bad Egg. This video, uploaded on October 1st, 2006 by user GlitchmanOmega, showcases what terrible things Bad Egg is capable of. Now, while various websites can tell you a lot about video games, nothing quite hits the spot for me like actual fieldwork, which is why I flew all the way to the Hoenn region to investigate this, which is why I decided I needed to get a bad egg for myself. I remember that catching trainer Pokemon tended to be a surefire way to get one, as most trainer Pokemon seem to be considered invalid by the game. I tried to find cheats to let me do this, but not a single soul on this planet seems to actually have said codes, or at least none that actually worked. Thankfully, as I needed one in Ruby, a Ruby and Sapphire exclusive glitch could help me out. By losing to a trainer with 2 or more Pokemon, and then having your next encounter be against a roaming Pokemon, you'll end up in a peculiar state. Defeating the roaming Pokemon causes the trainer you lost to suddenly send out their next Pokemon. As this is still considered a wild battle, you can catch that Pokemon, allowing you to catch a trainer's Pokemon. This causes a bad egg to appear in the place of that Pokemon. Due to the save editing nonsense I had to do to set this all up, instead of encountering the roaming Pokemon, I instead encountered the Pokemon that was supposed to be sent out after, a level 15 Dustox. Note that I used Repel to make sure that I couldn't encounter anything but what was supposed to be a level 30 Latias that I edited into the roaming slot. The Latias, anytime I encountered it, had no visible HP left, which tells me that the game considered it as fainted, and thus simply pushed the Dustox out in its place. With the bad egg in my grasp, all I needed to do was prove the validity of GlitchmanOmega's claims. Claim 1. The video is a public demonstration of a bad egg's dangers. Answer. I don't know yet, to be determined. Claim 2. Bad egg hatches from regular egg. Answer. I don't even know how to validate this claim. I know for a fact that the egg shown in the video is not going to hatch into a bad egg, as I've hatched that egg many times and it's always a why not. But for the sake of research, I suppose I have no other choice. Alright, the egg hatched to a why not as anticipated. My best guess is that due to the short period it takes for the egg to hatch in the video, it appears a cheat was used to speed up egg cycles, which I have to assume resulted in a bad egg due to how unstable the code likely was. It probably messed with more values than intended, resulting in an invalid Pokemon and thus a bad egg. Claim 3. Music that made the video scarier than it needed to be for child me. Answer. Claim 4. One step later, bad egg will hatch and freeze the game. Answer. I spent 30 minutes trying to hatch a bad egg. Nothing happened. So I have to assume that either something is missing in my attempts, or this is once again a cheat code. So I'll have to say no to this one as with most claims before it. Everything after this point relies on claim 4 to be true, so that's as far as this video analysis goes. Contrary to all of my deepest fears, this video had almost nothing to say and even less than that. I got a lot of conflicting reports when looking into bad eggs, which is naturally very strange. Perhaps there is a way to hatch a bad egg without cheating, but until that information shows itself, I cannot claim it possible. 30 minutes of trying to hatch a bad egg at 10 times speed really makes it hard to doubt my case. MissingNo itself gave me a sense of dread as a child. Not entirely sure why, but that's the vibe with a lot of things, really. I recall it being hard to get near Cinnabar Island without remembering its existence, a process that I found anything but pleasant. Tentacool outside of Yellow version had really small tentacles in a way that I wasn't used to, and so I'd always associate this oddity with MissingNo, as if its mere presence was affecting the wildlife. The fact that Cinnabar Island has no wild encounter data of its own was always really interesting to me, and I'd find myself, Game Boy caught in a nerve-induced death grip, testing out what would appear there quite a few times, completely unaware as to how the mechanism behind the bug even functioned. At the time, the idea of encountering Ponyta and Execute in the waters next to the island was so subtly wrong that it kept me endlessly fascinated. I remember seeing a fair few videos discussing MissingNo in any level of detail. They mostly just made my fear of it worse, as the level of misinformation out there was astonishing. Not only that, but people liked to make fake videos showcasing ways that MissingNo could appear. Most distinctly, one where the inaccessible waters of Sinnoh's Route 206 yielded a very familiar face. Perhaps even too familiar. It's funny to me how decked out with warnings and prefaces as to the false nature of its contents this video is. And yet even still, I absorbed it as though it were at least somewhat plausible. It's really interesting to think about how scared I was of MissingNo, yet also how little I actually knew about it. I was flooded with the mythos without any of the fact. Actually knowing about MissingNo is the way I near completely killed its power over me. Sure, it's still unnerving in many regards, but it isn't outright frightening anymore. Unfortunate how MissingNo is only the beginning though, or perhaps fortunate if you're enjoying the video. Many years following my introduction to MissingNo, I would have to face a foe far more formidable than it. If you've been on the internet for long enough, there's a small chance you've heard of Creepypasta. For those who don't know, when a Jeff and a The Killer go to sleep each other very much, out pops a Creepypasta. Like a hurricane, Creepypasta absolutely decimated my life in the most fascinating of ways. Alright, let's dissect some of the stories that scared me, because that's like my thing I do. While I'm technically talking about Lavender Town Syndrome, I'm more so talking about Buried Alive. It seems that the Lavender Town mythos spans multiple stories, with Buried Alive being caught in the mix. It's true that I was spooked by the prospect of the music that makes you take your own life. How could I not be? The main thing that frightened me, though, was Buried Alive, the supposed unused, unfinished, and undead boss fight at the top of Pokemon Tower. I've already talked about this guy plenty on the channel, so I'll probably only say as much as I need to. The gist is, at the top of the Pokemon Tower, there exists a caught boss fight against a rotting corpse known as Buried Alive. In many depictions, Buried Alive hosts a very strong and difficult fight, with Pokemon levels bordering on absurdity. Though the story itself doesn't really mention such a thing, the impossibility of the fight was always an important factor to me, and so it's important to mention. Two of Buried Alive's Pokemon are White Hands, the subject of a sister story. Winning to Buried Alive would freeze the game, while losing would trigger a traditional game over screen featuring your character being eaten. One that would overwrite the hardware's normal startup screen. Buried Alive is an absurd story. It speaks of things that don't make any logistical sense, even within the realm of Creepypasta. For instance, a WAV file being willingly placed and played within the game. I'm almost certain a file like that would actually be larger than the very ROM that the game is composed of. That's not even to mention the idea of the hardware altering itself so dramatically in response to the cartridge's instructions. Though I'm not an expert in such things, I can't even begin to imagine the feasibility of such a procedure. Despite everything I just said, it's hard not to understand what it was that frightened me. You see, Buried Alive is like Michael Jackson in that he obliterates your entire Pokémon party and then performs undesirable actions on your physical form. It's quite simple. Buried Alive was scary because of all the things in the world of Pokémon you could have by your side. Very few of them would actually be of any use here. You could play by the rules and be the strongest trainer alive, but unfortunately it's the strongest trainer dead who wins in the end. That's also presumably why the Wild Michael Jackson videos frightened me, and why plenty of creepypastas of a similar caliber to Buried Alive did too. It's the idea that no matter how strong you may be, there are still things in the fantastical world you thought you were the master of, waiting to ambush you and send any sense of accomplishment or power directly to the very hell that they just crawled out from. As a child, you don't tend to have much power or sway, so the thought of losing control over one of the very few or perhaps even only things you have control over was definitely a huge part of making Buried Alive so scary. Also, zombie men are pretty scary too, I guess. I remember finding the process of climbing Pokemon Tower in any version of Pokemon difficult after that. I always feared that, if I weren't careful, that extra grave would appear and I'd have to fight for my life. There was also a fear of Buried Alive existing in the darkened corners of the real world. That mostly came down to being frightened of something emerging from the floor suddenly. Not much you can really do about that one. Ever think about how Buried Alive says that he's lonely but has a Gengar which is basically guaranteed to be sapient and capable of providing company? What a weirdo. Alright, now that we've gotten the story with actual words to say about it out of the way, let's talk about this thing. Chikorita's Oil. A story that is definitely. If you remember this story, it likely wasn't because of the story itself, but the artwork that accompanied it on the Creepypasta wiki. The art was very likely the inspiration for the pasta, which is why the story itself is so... not really there. The image attached fucking destroyed my brain as a child, and I can't really blame me for that reaction. But you know what's the most interesting part? According to the dates I could find, the story was posted to the Creepypasta wiki sometime in early 2012, but was then removed about a year later. As a result, the usual candidate for hosting old deleted stories, the Trollpasta wiki, is basically the only place you're going to find it now. The issue being that the transcription is not correct. It's missing both the image that was attached to the story and the very first line of the pasta, wherein the author confirms that the art inspired the story. That is to say, the very heart of the story, the fact that it was based on some fuck-ass image, isn't present in the only public-facing archive of it. Interestingly enough, the first reading video still available of the story came only 2 months prior to its deletion. Who's to say we'd even have what we do without it? The longer this goes on, the more I start to realize that perhaps I actually have words to say. What we're left with is the hard fact that the image is lost. Not completely lost, mind you. We do still have what appears to be a rendition of the image created with the Nintendo 3DS game Colors 3D. It's significantly more tame feeling than the original, but there's no telling exactly what was changed or if this was just a variation of the original. Despite my best efforts and the efforts of my Discord server, it seems that the Chikorita's Oil image is officially missing. A real shame for me now, but probably a huge relief for me from like 14 years ago. I recall trying multiple times over the years, having remembered the story, to figure out why exactly the story came about. Or, in hindsight, the image itself. I even at points convinced myself that Chikorita and Oil had something to do with each other, and I simply hadn't looked into it enough. What about Chikorita causes one to think, okay, love the idea already, but what if it produced oil from its facial Oh god, I can feel the creepypasta analysis brain kicking in. It's happening. So the story is about the protagonist, Jacob. Jacob goes to their local pawn shop, whose name is apparently Gold, Silver, and Games Pawn, which is pointed out to be kind of bad. You said it. From there, a copy of Pokemon Gold is purchased, one which, despite having a Chikorita silhouette on its sticker, is otherwise in good condition. After completing the transaction of $5, the fun gets to begin. Our protagonist gets to overreact to many small things, apparently finding the concept of Chikorita producing oil to be so profoundly terrible that they nearly vomit. The most important part is how the story ends, though. Naturally, the Chikorita's anger at being used this way is taken out on the unfortunate soul who picked up the cartridge, not the one who actually did anything wrong. After exploding the fourth wall with the power of saying a real person's name, the game ceases to function. And what appears to be the reason for that? Why not the cartridge's oil-soaked insides? This story is weird, and I almost had nothing to say about it until I remembered who I was and what this channel is. When I originally read the pasta eons ago, I don't think I actually absorbed even a single crumb of what it was actually about, other than having a frightening photo. Looking at it now, I can see quite a few things worth mentioning. I discussed in my last serious video the whole thing about children writing creepypastas and said pastas reflecting feelings that they have about the subject, such as stories about abandoned or apparently wronged Pokemon getting revenge on the player, and how that guilt of abandoning your digital companions has seemingly been a universal experience. So many stories center around this feeling, and I feel like this one has something similar going on. The Chikorita lashes out at the player for the actions of an unknown other. Jacob didn't do anything wrong. They're a perfectly average and normal human being, all things considered. It reads to me like an actualized version of one's internal guilt. The type produced by not confirmation but the lack thereof. Learning to feel bad about actions that weren't your own, because the adults in your life can't be bothered to look upon you for what you are. A person like them. It creates a complex of feeling bad over things you didn't even do. Suddenly the weight of the world is upon you. I know more people like this than should ever exist. To an extent, I even used to experience this myself. It's painfully relatable. Authors put pieces of themselves in their work, even if they don't intend to. I could be reading too deeply into things, as the kids like to say, but I don't think that mindset helps anyone. Sure, the story could be literally just what the author thought was scary at the time with no deeper meaning or themes, and that's probably what they intended. Doesn't mean the emotions given off by the pasta aren't present. You never mean to shed your skin or leave your hair behind while walking through a place, but that doesn't stop your DNA from being at the scene. I simply found a meaning in the words, and that's what I love about reading stories like these. No matter how dumb you may think they are, they always say something about the person who wrote them, or even the very person reading them. I like that about stories, especially creepypastas like these ones. Also, I just realized that perhaps the Chikorita producing oil thing could be about, like, fossil fuels? That thing is like a dinosaur, right? I think. Like a sauropod of some sort. Makes a lot of sense, actually. Here's where I talk about a bunch of different stories that wormed their way into my brain as a kid in one way or another. But not to the point of dominating my thought processes. Hypno's Lullaby never actually scared me at all, but I had a close friend at the time who was absolutely devastated by it. I remember him mentioning that he once slept on the couch of his downstairs living room because he was too afraid to go upstairs to his bedroom at the hour he found himself at. And it was all because of Hypno. Also, fun fact, the image commonly associated with Hypno's Lullaby is actually an official t-shirt design from all the way back in 2008. It was part of the Pokemon 151 line. Of the designs made, Hypno was the only one never released in the US. I wonder why. I recall Pokemon Black being a story that I didn't read for the longest time, instead being one that I vaguely danced around. Like, I understood that it was a scary story, and the cartridge related to it was iconic, but I never actually found out what it was about for a little while following. It's a pretty decent story, all things considered. Nothing to really say that I haven't already done so in other videos. I just remember the mythos surrounding the cartridge being far more notable than the story itself. It had a weird amount of plausibility to it compared to the average game pasta, and there was the sense that perhaps the cartridge is truly out there somewhere just waiting to be found. Rarely does a creepypasta hit as hard as this one does. I don't entirely recall it causing me a lot of fear or unease at the time, but it always stuck out as an incredibly apt and horrifying depiction of MissingNo in the world of Pokémon. This creditless pasta was posted to the F Yeah Pokémon Creepypasta Tumblr blog on April 4th of 2011, making it fairly ancient all things considered. Even though prior revisions on the Creepypasta wiki correctly credit this post, it would eventually shed its source for some unknown reason in a 2015 revision. Odd. This pasta tells the tale of Viridian City's gym leader, Giovanni, as he learns the hard way of be kind of mean and you and everyone you love will face an unfathomable, painful, and horrific demise. He is faced with a bizarre challenger, one who sends out a Pokemon that is hard to even recognize as such. We know it as MissingNo, but Giovanni learned to know it as his downfall, as it, one after another, kills its Pokemon in ways that I'm 99% sure nobody on planet Earth has ever experienced before. The story is gripping, and it was a delight to reread. If it weren't for the fact that this video is getting way longer than originally anticipated, I would actually just read the entire story right now. Maybe one day. Though the story was posted without a title, the person who posted it on the Creepypasta wiki named it Kecleon, which is just MissingNo's Japanese name. It's funny how MissingNo keeps being brought up in my videos. Very funny. For the sake of not leaving you completely hanging, and to show just how cool the pasta is, let me go ahead and read a passage from it that I think really sells what the story is trying to do. Water gun, commanded the challenger. The fluid squirted through the air and impacted Rhyhorn squarely in the face. Giovanni's face betrayed his worry. Rhyhorn did not usually survive any decently powered water or grass-type moves. Yet Rhyhorn did not falter. The pile of trash's special must have been completely pathetic for Rhyhorn to take such a small amount of damage. But something was wrong. Something was off about Rhyhorn after the brown liquid contacted him. Giovanni could sense it, though he couldn't quite discern what it was. Something seemed different about the shape of Rhyhorn's back, or the pattern of his armor plates. Giovanni only became truly alarmed when Rhyhorn did not turn his head as usual to receive orders. He stood unmoving, frozen to the spot from which he had received the attack. Giovanni walked over to Rhyhorn to examine his face and found it scrambled. No discernible features. Various pieces of eyes, mouth, and nose were scattered haphazardly around its ruined face, which resembled a disassembled jigsaw puzzle on a featureless gray background. Giovanni was aghast. Rhyhorn? Rhyhorn, use Fury Attack. Rhyhorn? Rhyhorn was not fainted and showed no signs of collapse or fatigue, but he was clearly dead. I tried to group the topics up in a way that kept similar concepts together, but we've officially reached the point where I can't do that anymore. It's now time for random bullshit that isn't entirely related to one another. Dewford Town, an island community in the bottom left of the Hoenn region, is home to a place that always fascinated me, Dewford Hall. It contains gossiping NPCs who talk about what's currently trendy, and you have the ability to establish this through the power of the EasyChat system. Just enter 2 of the pre-approved words and watch as you make the NPCs say the actual stupidest thing possible. I was told by my buddy O that this man right here, who normally gives you the TM for Sludge Bomb, actually gives you a TM based on what the trendy phrase is. That is to say, if you entered something absolutely crude and foul, you would be given a move based on that phrase. Somehow I believed this, even though his example was being able to invent a move called Sex with You, which caused, well, you see, when a Pokemon and a Pokemon daycare each other, of course the man is actually just some random guy who is having a lethal back in my day attack, and channeled all of his bitterness into a disc for you to take. I now understand where O likely got his information from, and it's not impossible he genuinely thought he was telling the truth. You see, if you talk to the man a second time, he says something worth taking note of. That being the fact that he finds Pokemon with the trendy phrase as a move cool too. This suggests that whatever you entered is actually a move that exists. I could see myself falling for this text, so it wouldn't shock me if he saw it in this way and was merely trying to tell me about it. From one O topic to another, here's the story about the Pidgeot that could. In more recent Pokemon titles, having high friendship with your Pokemon can cause it to withstand fatal damage with 1 HP remaining. It's a cute concept, if not a pain in the ass when you actually want to play the game fairly and be on equal footing with your opponent. This mechanic was properly introduced in 2013 with X and Y's affection stat, which would later merge with the already existing friendship stat. It's true that early generations had friendship as a stat, technically going back to as early as Yellow, but O claimed that his Pidgeot was holding on to 1 HP fairly often due to the power of his bond with it. He was playing Gold and Silver, by the way. I can't remember which one, but neither would be able to substantiate this claim. I saw with my own eyes too, but it never once occurred to me that perhaps it was just a focus band. I ran a quick test, and yes, the game does tell you when a Pokemon hung on due to their focus band, and names the item directly in the same message. Either he didn't read or knew he wasn't telling the truth. Perhaps he wanted to believe it was the bond that kept his Pidgeot alive. I can't really blame him for that, when the series tends to put a lot of emphasis on how important friendship and bond is, contrary to how little it actually impacts the gameplay. Have you ever thought to yourself, man, this shit terrible, how do I unevolve it? Well, fear no more. Here's the solution you've always wanted. Professor Birch can give you a stone to de-evolve your Pokemon. Or more specifically, your starter. O told me that it was something you got from Birch to unevolve your starter, and that the stone itself would have been a water stone for me and my Swampert. Never did learn how or why the stone was obtained. Still waiting on that one. After the release of hit video game Pokémon Platinum, how will the developers continue to expand upon the games? Why, with Pokémon Rainbow, of course. Didn't you hear about Pokémon Rainbow? Someone at my school sure did. It's going to be awesome, guys. Can you believe it, guys? Pokémon Rainbow, just a week away. I'm sure we're all aware of the uncle who works for Nintendo, right? The one who has insider knowledge and knows how to perform the Super Mario sex scene unlock procedure. I knew someone with a similar uncle. While he never got a name, we'll just call him Uncle Replay. For the sake of the video, we'll be calling the person who told me of Uncle Replay Q. Q was always a strange kid, but never once did he ever actually strike me as the type to have an awesome uncle. That was until the day he told me of his uncle. A special rare uncle variant that had incredible powers such as letting him catch other people's Pokemon. His uncle also managed to get him some strong Pokemon, though I don't recall Q ever being unbeatable in battle. He was strong, certainly, but that was strength in comparison to me. The undefeated champion with his level 100 Empoleon, Rayquaza, and Metagross. Having such a powerful uncle seemingly wasn't enough to make him a good trainer, and so I would still win. I never did understand what was up with his uncle until the day where I went to the store and bought my own uncle. The rush of being able to have anything you want in a Pokemon game is crazy. I still have my old Action Replay uncle somewhere, but it can't be used due to how severely protected the thing is. I don't have the code that came with it, and so I'm kind of locked out of my uncle. I do recall using it to get every decoration in my old Alpha Sapphire save, though. Here it is, what I consider to be the actual stupidest thing I believed about Pokemon. You see, in the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon series, more specifically for this entry, Explorers of Sky, the Pokemon Kecleon has been designated the shopkeeper species. Anytime you see a Kecleon, it's a shopkeeper. That's just how it works. You can purchase items from Kecleon outside of dungeons, but you're also fully capable of doing so from within dungeons if you happen to stumble across a shop there. Shops aren't the most common occurrence, but they can occasionally provide you with resources that you're sorely lacking, such as food, or rare resources near exclusively obtained as their wares. Shops work a little differently in dungeons, lacking the traditional shop menu you're likely used to. Instead, you simply pick up items from off the shop's carpet and talk to the shopkeeper to buy them. This also means you can easily steal items by walking off of the shop's carpet without paying. However, such an action is not without consequences. And boy, are the consequences heavy. Should you fail to pay for the item you picked up, the Kecleon will claim you a thief, and that's when it all turns dire. Kecleon don't show mercy to thieves. Unlike every other Pokemon in the game, these angry Kecleon have an innate speed boost, granting them a second movement. If you think you can just run, you would be terribly wrong. There is no outrunning a Kecleon. If you think you could fight back, you'd still be wrong. Kecleon have stats nearing the limit of what any given Pokemon can have, making any hit from them likely the only one they need to win. To defeat a Kecleon, one needs to either be extremely strong or extremely crafty. The right combination of items and moves can subdue one, but upon doing so, you'd likely be ambushed by what comes next. It's not immediately obvious, but once a Kecleon grows furious, Pokemon native to the current floor cease to spawn, as if aware of what is about to happen. From there, the only things that do spawn are more of the furious Kecleon looking to reclaim the stolen goods. The longer you spend on the floor, the slimmer your chances of survival become. You might stand a chance against one Kecleon, but what about an entire room of them? If you can reach the stairs and escape to the next floor, you'll lose your pursuers for good. But get completely downed by them, and you'll find that what remains of your items have all been turned into plain seeds when you next check your bag. It might not sound like it at first, but Kecleon can be recruited like any other Pokemon. It's just not easy, as you could probably already tell. I spent more time as a child than I could ever hope to remember trying to find the strategy for this. I eventually reached my conclusion. I would use the power of Ghost-type Pokemon to hide in walls where Kecleon couldn't fight me, and use Psywave to deal fixed amounts of damage. Sure, it took a few uses to kill a Kecleon, but it actually dealt damage to them. I would spend hours and hours every session trying to get a Kecleon. Dozens and dozens of attempts, all with no result. Eventually I stopped and never came back to it. Little did I know there was a reason for my lack of success. Kecleon have a negative 49.5% chance to be recruited. That's right, a negative chance. In order to get the percentage into a position where it can actually function, you'll need to perform a few extra steps. First, you need to be level 99 or higher. High level adds to the recruitment chance. Second, you need an item equipped known as the Golden Mask. It increases the odds of recruiting Pokemon much more than the alternatives. Finally, you need the Fast Friend IQ skill, which only specific Pokemon can even get. Combined, these factors increase the odds from negative 49.5% to 0.1%, or 1 in 1,000, making it possible to recruit a Kecleon with enough persistence and/or luck. I, however, only learned of these extra requirements as an adult. I would spend hours and hours of my childhood at a time trying to make this work without knowing that I needed a ton of extra steps to even make it work. That I never even had a chance of success. I just kept pressing on unknowing of the outcome already predestined out of my favor, completely out of my grasp. It remains the stupidest thing I ever believed, not because I was stupid for believing it, but because the fact that it ever had to be that way was as stupid as they come. There wasn't a single crumb of evidence in the game showing me that I needed to perform these extra steps. Maybe the strategy guide held the information I needed, but that thing was a bludgeoning weapon. I can't blame anyone for not finding it in there. For the sake of this video and all that it represented, I was determined to find my first Kecleon. Thankfully, I'd already had a post-game save file for Explorers of Sky. No need to play through the entire game. The first thing I concerned myself with was getting the Golden Mask, a task that wasn't hard at all. Zero Isle North, the dungeon where you get the mask, isn't actually that difficult when you have max stats. The second thing I concerned myself with was training the Pokemon I would use for the job. I eventually picked Jirachi for a variety of reasons. For one, it has a good defensive typing, especially in a Gen 4 game. While bolstering one's attacking stats is as easy as eating a seed, raising the defenses isn't so simple, but that's where Jirachi learning Cosmic Power came in handy. Obviously, it was in the right group for having the Fast Friend IQ skill, as that was the most integral part of all. The process of raising this Jirachi from around level 32 to level 99 wasn't easy. I put my all into it, and after 3 days I finally had it to where I wanted it to be. The first handful of attempts at recruiting Kecleon weren't successful, and there was a big reason for why. I couldn't blindly lunge at them, or even stand too close for that matter. And it was all because of one move. A move that turns Kecleon from cakewalks to nightmares. Screech. In mainline Pokemon games, Screech is a joke move. It has 85% accuracy and lowers the target's defense stat by 2 stages, effectively meaning it halves the stat. Sounds at least somewhat formidable until you remember that the opponent can just switch out to remove the changes. Suddenly a move that sounds at least plausibly good is nothing but a meme at best. Mystery Dungeon changes this. Screech, alongside a small handful of other moves that lower stats, function in an entirely different way than something like Growl or Leer. Rather than lowering your stat by a set number of stages, it works off of its own system separate from normal stat changes. A system that initially lowers your defense to 1/4 of its original value. Or as Bulbapedia puts it, this reduces the target's their defense stat to 1/4 of the original value. This continues to stack up to 1/128th. If a Kecleon lands Screech even once, you're dead. You might see yourself as alive, or you might be able to control your character, but you are not alive anymore. You have died. There is no amount of cosmic power that can undo what has been done. Max stat stages still see you taking hundreds of damage at a minimum. You are dead. Not every Kecleon even has Screech. It's a total toss-up, but when it does happen, it's instantaneous and brutal. One Screech is all it takes. You can't survive it. You might think that a Wonder Tile could save you, but the IQ groups you need to have know the skill Trap Buster. Wonder Tiles are considered traps, and so there's a non-zero chance you lose that Wonder Tile without even activating it. I thought that getting Skill Swap would allow me to get the ability Soundproof from an ally that I could bring with me. But as it turns out, Skill Swap is really hard to get in Sky. In the end, I just had to take it as it was. Screech, the destroyer of worlds. And to top it all off, when I finally recruited a Kecleon, I realized that I wasn't even recording. I had forgotten to record the session. The moments leading up to this historic event are now gone. In hindsight, evasion orbs probably would have helped a lot. And now, for the bonus entry. Same as the original. I played a lot of Fossil Fighters when I was a kid, though plenty of that playtime was prior to actually reaching the game's conclusion. This is because I would get stuck during a moment in the game where you're expected to smash a rock to pieces. You see, breaking the rock made the same noises as breaking a fossil, which I knew was bad. Making it worse, the first few layers of the rock weren't like that, and didn't make those noises. Which led me to think I was doing something wrong. This left me unable to pass that point in the game until I randomly decided to see what would happen if I just drilled a hole straight through it. Sure enough, that filled the progress bar. As a result of my playtime, I had max rank Vivisaurs before defeating that fuck-ass rock, and it led to a strange belief. See, when a Vivisaur reaches max rank, its metal gains this yellowish background. For whatever reason, I saw this background and thought it meant my Vivisaurs were getting old and were close to dying of natural causes. As time went on, however, I never saw such an event take place, and so it's safe to say that I was wrong. I can see it though. The shade of yellow reminds me of a sunset, and so perhaps I thought my Vivisaurs were at their sunset phase, the point before the lights go out. There it is. Happy anniversary to my channel, and I guess myself. Except I've also been on YouTube for longer than this channel, so maybe just the channel itself. I currently stand at the time of writing this script with 8.72k subscribers on this channel, which is significantly more than I thought I would ever have. Sure, it took me 5 years to get here, but plenty of people put more effort into their work than me and get even less over longer periods of time. I'm lucky to be here. Lucky to have people watching, even with how often I don't upload anything. This channel, and by extension the people watching, have given me the chance to experience so many weird and interesting things. I got to speak to one of my favorite YouTubers, blame it on Jorge, and help him with a video, for crying out loud. When I originally set out to make this channel, I did so for a few reasons. First and most obvious is that I thought it would be fun. My second ambition was finding like-minded individuals with the same strain of autism that I had. I'd say both of those initial reasons turned out well. Truth be told, I never really had that strong of a voice at a default. I struggled to stand up for myself in many places, but this channel? It's been what I've needed to get better at that. To remember that I have a voice and can use it. I'm still fairly meek, all things considered, and I can put my foot down incorrectly sometimes, but I'm starting to get better about things. As time goes on, and I have started to see the ways that I affect people, I realize that though my channel may be entertainment, it's something that matters to a lot of people. Users I've been watching for the longest time, the very same ones that inspired me to be here, are now subscribed to me and watching my every upload, as I once did with them. I've been able to speak to creators I once thought were above me. I've helped people just by being myself. I'm not changing the world, but I am making something happen. Every time I can touch someone's heart or make them think, even if I do so through talking about scary internet stories, I remember why I want to do this. I can make change happen just by being myself. That's why I always want people to understand that I see the same thing being possible for them. It's scary to be yourself in front of so many eyes, but though you can't see their thoughts, you'd be surprised just how many of those people you matter to whenever you put yourself out there. I just want to keep being this for people, especially when all I have to do is what I've always wanted to do in the first place. Happy 5 years on YouTube, and until next time, well, have a fungus.